So, everybody, this is Dick, ABØCD. He's been a
Hi,
ham
Dick.
for at least 2 years. Right. When you first licensed?
95.
95. Good long time. A lot longer than me. He has a friend. His friend seems to have a collection of military radio gear and phone gear. So why don't we all welcome Dick?
Yes. Well, first of all, I'm not a military radio aficionado, but I play one on television. So, bear with me here. I'm going to fumble my way through this, and I made some notes and did some research. But just to give you a little bit of background, one of my boyhood friends.
Much better.
No, we need light.
The door.
One of my boyhood friends lives out in Lakewood, and we went to. We met each other in kindergarten back in northern Illinois. His name is Claude Bergman, and Claude went to school at the School of Mines, became a petroleum engineer, and. When he was in college, when he was in undergraduate, before he graduated, he and his girlfriend were hiking in Rocky Mountain National Park. And they fell off a cliff. She landed on top of him and he broke his neck. And was partially paralyzed and recovered, had to go through about a year's worth of recovery. And got himself back to the point where he could walk around and pursue his career as a petroleum geologist and got a master's degree. He did have a lifelong career. And he eventually moved back to Colorado. He worked around the country to move back to Colorado and lives out in Lakewood. About 20 years ago, he decided he wanted to trace every step that his father took during World War II. His father was a and he managed to do that, and in the course of that work, he started collecting military stuff, including radio stuff. And so some of this is from Claude's collection. He is at a point now where walking is very difficult for him, and otherwise he'd be here and he could participate in the presentation because he's very knowledgeable about this stuff. But he collected it over the last 20 years, along with lots of other things. He's got scads of stuff at his house. He's got a friend who's helping him clear out stuff and organize and get his house navigable for him. It happens to be a tri-level.
Oh, jeez.
And but he's going to put lifts. He's going to stay in his house, I guess. He's going to put lifts on the little stairs. But there's all these little stairs that go up and down all over the place. So anyway, so all this stuff is from Claude's collection, and we started talking about this presentation about a year ago, and finally just pulled it off. So I'm going to kind of go through this stuff, and I think I want to start with the receivers. I'm going to do this system last, but let's start over here with the receivers, and let me get my receiver notes out here. Radio set. Got some fact sheets. If anybody wants a set of fact sheets, I can either email them to them, or I've got a couple sets here. Let me figure this out here. Okay. We've got 3 receivers. So these 2 big ones, this one and this one, they were referred to as morale receivers. And Basically, what they've got on them are the AM broadcast bands and then some shortwave bands. And they were built to distribute to the troops in the field so that they could somehow pick up broadcast signals, either on AM or shortwave, just to find out what's going on. So they were kind of the morale boosters. This one over here was a Navy product. It was designated the 6000 BAC. And some of these numbers, and I have some of these numbers in the fact sheets, there are all kinds of numbers for different things, and it's a little confusing. Sometimes I might have some of them backwards, but they had numbers that referred to complete radio sets, like all this stuff, which for this particular one is the SCR, Signal Corps Radio 284. That refers to everything. And then this radio has its own separate number. I've got it on one of my fact sheets. But anyway, sometimes the numbers can be kind of confusing, but that's military. They're just number crazy. Very quickly, this rig operates on 6 volts DC or 115 volts AC. Covers the standard broadcast band, plus 5.8 megahertz to 16 megahertz shortwave. And it was built by the Industrial Tool and Die Works of Minneapolis, Minnesota. And that particular company, a few guys from that company, after the war, formed another company called Mound Metalcraft of Mound, Minnesota. And they started producing things like Tonka toys. So that's sort of the lineage of some of this stuff. So this guy is also AM and shortwave. And this was built by Zenith and companies called Majestic and Esprit. And I'm not sure. Those two don't ring a bell, but I think this is a Zenith. In fact, I know this is a Zenith model because it was built in Philadelphia, and the serial numbers indicate as such. But it did broadcast, and then its shortwave bands were 3.6 to 8.5 megahertz, and then a separate band 8.5 to 19 megahertz. And one of the things that's interesting about this radio is that toward the end of the war and after the war, the United States got some European companies, especially one in France, to start building these things to help regenerate their industrial base, which obviously was decimated during World War II. So a bunch of these were made in Europe as well. This thing operates on 110 volts AC, 12 volts DC, and 90 volts DC. So there's different voltages. One thing you find out when you start looking at all these radios, everyone has its own different voltage requirement. There's no.
Was there any rationale behind that?
I'm sure there's none. It could have to do with battery technology. Who the hell knows? I don't know.
I think 90 volts was an aircraft standard then, maybe. But they used a lot of dynamotors, and there might be one in there, I'm guessing.
Yeah. So, who knows? But no 13.8 volts for everybody kind of thing. Now this little guy, this is the BC 728. And it's a super het, AM, only covers 2 to 6 megahertz, and it runs on 2 volts DC. And this is, I call it a bug out radio, but they call it an alert or warning receiver. Units in the field carried these things and put them on a truck or nearby, and they were designed to get an alert, like troops are moving into your area, get the hell out of there, or you've been targeted, bombs are coming in, scram, and that was the sole purpose of this receiver. So those are the receivers. This is an example of a bolt-on loudspeaker. They could bolt on a truck or whatever.
So those two receivers aren't mobile. They were stationary, used for stationary use. Is that right?
Yeah, but they could, both of them could be operated off battery as well as alternating current.
By the way, that speaker design
Yeah.
is still used to this day by the Army and Marines. Same identical
Yeah.
design.
Well, it's your basic box.
Yeah.
How can you make these better?
Carbon fiber.
Fiber.
Yeah. Some millennial will make an app for that, right?
3D printed.
All right, yeah. All right, so let me set this aside. So let's look at the portable guys. So this is World War II stuff. This is the SCR 536 or the BC 611. I think the SCR 536 designation is the whole package. So, that package included extra crystals, batteries, that kind of crap that's all in a box or whatever. But this is the BC 611 handy talkie. And this was originally designated as a handy talkie, so that might be the origin of that word. Who knows?
Could we hold Scott's handheld up next to that for the video?
Yeah, yeah.
The modern one versus the.
Yeah, okay.
So this is World War II vintage. Maybe you haven't seen it. It's got an antenna. Comes out like so.
Turn it on, you pull out the last section, is the switch.
Yeah, that's right.
Very cool.
Yeah. So that protects it. And I think it doesn't have a plug for a phone.
So it can't get accidentally turned on.
That's right.
There's special
Um,
batteries in there?
Pardon me?
Special battery in there?
Oh, I can't give you the details on the battery.